Well, now there's a couple seconds.
You are now live.
Good morning. Welcome and thank you for joining us today at More Trees, Please. How trees help Philadelphia address climate change and environmental justice. I'm Paige Carlson-Heim, the director of TD's Office of Charitable and Community Giving and the TD Charitable Foundation, and I'm very excited to be moderating today's discussion. Since 2016, TD has been supporting Tree Philly's efforts to distribute yard trees to Philadelphians so that they can plant and care for trees on their properties. In 2019, we expanded our support to help them increase the number of trees on city streets and in parks to give a boost to low canopy communities. This expanded support will help Tree Philly plant more than 20,000 trees through 2021, which will also contribute to our goal of planting 1 million trees in North America by 2030. We'll begin with some introductions so you can learn about our panelists and how they made their way into the world of trees. We'll also ask our panelists to share their favorite kind of tree and why. After the introductions, we'll begin to dive into what the urban forest is and why it's so important. Let's hear first from Erica Smith-Fitchman, Community Forestry Manager at Philadelphia Parks and Recreation. Hi, Erica.
Hi, Paige. Thanks. So I am Erica Smith-Fitchman, Community Forestry Manager at Philadelphia Parks and Recreation. My journey into the world of Philly's trees started when I volunteered with UC Green, actually a small cooperative community greening organization in my neighborhood of West Philadelphia. Previously, I had been very involved in community gardening and urban agriculture in the city, but once I started planting trees with UC Green, I was hooked. So I'm now a proud board member there. And my role at Philadelphia Parks and Recreation started in 2012, and my role is to bring together people and trees in many different ways. I started in 2012 developing the Tree Philly program and giving away free trees to people to plant in their yards, and I now supervise the incredible team that manages that program, and we've given away 25,000 trees to Philadelphia residents since we started. I'm also the project lead for the upcoming Urban Forest Strategic Plan, which will bring together stakeholders, including everyone on this panel, and from across the city, the state, and the region and in the nation, to lay out a plan for the growth and care of our urban forest with a focus on community engagement, environmental justice, and sustainability. My favorite tree is the black gum tree, Nyssa sylvatica, because of the incredible fall color that we're about to see from that tree this season. So now you'll hear from Maura McCarthy, Executive Director at Fairmount Park Conservancy, our nonprofit partner on the Tree Philly program.
Thanks, Erica. Hi, everybody. I'm Maura McCarthy. I'm the still relatively new Executive Director at the Fairmount Park Conservancy. I started there last November, so almost a whole year under my belt. And before that, I was the executive director at the Friends of the Wissahickon. So if any of you know the Wissahickon Valley Park in Northwest Philadelphia, that's where I had my start for the first 14 years. So I got to know our park system pretty intimately from the sense of one particular location. I came to trees from a more unorthodox route than Erica did. I have a PhD in anthropology, and I studied the anthropology of religion and use of new internet technologies for proselytization. But one of the other things I studied during the course of my fieldwork was how folks in my subject community were using the land that they received as a gift from the city of Orlando, as it so happened, and what treatment of the land meant in terms of a value system that folks had, but also looking at other examples across the world of how people's relationship with the land really impacts the stewardship of the land, the quality and health of it, and really impacts the quality of life in those communities. So I came from a slightly different direction. I grew up going to the Wissahickon, and I wound up circling back postgraduate to the Wissahickon, and that's how I wound up here at the Fairmount Park Conservancy. So I have a different favorite tree, which is the American beech, which I love because it has the most beautiful bark and the most beautiful canopy when it lets light in through the forest floor. It is my very favorite tree. And when it's really, really big, it looks like an elephant's leg. I like that a lot about it. So now we're going to hear from one of our partners in this work, Tim Eiffel from the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. Tim.
Thanks so much, Mara. I am Tim Eiffel. I am the Associate Director of Trees at the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. I'm also fairly new on my job. I started in March. My first day of work was the day our office closed down for the pandemic. So I have yet to actually work in our office, but I've been really enjoying the role. I guess I got my start, working with trees back when I was in college. I worked for my campus arboretum and planted a lot of trees that, it reminds me when I go back of how long ago that was when I see how big some of those trees are that I got to take part in planting. It's a little bit daunting for me. And then worked for the Forest Service for a little while out in California in a very, very different role. But most of my career was focused at an organization called Philly Fellows, and we were all about building capacity for different nonprofits in the Philadelphia area. And so I think that really prepared me well for my work here at PHS, because even though it didn't work with trees, what I do here is really about helping these community groups build their capacity so that they can get involved in community and urban forestry in really hands-on ways. So as far as my role now, the bulk of our trees work here at PHS is focused on our Tree Tenders program, which works in the city of Philadelphia, as well as Montgomery, Bucks, Chester, and Delaware counties. We have groups all around the region. And they're all, mostly volunteer groups made up of residents. Sometimes they're affiliated with different nonprofits or community organizations. And people work together with their neighbors to plant and care for trees, mostly street trees, although out in the suburbs, there's more park trees involved with that. But they plant and care for trees in their neighborhoods and bring the magic and the amenity of trees to the places where they live. We also run a watershed and riparian grants program where we help. This is more focused on natural areas, but helping to plant trees as well as shrubs and other plants to improve water quality in watersheds. Favorite tree is a really tough question. We actually didn't discuss these in advance, but I came really close to saying the beech too, because that's one of my favorites. But I think I have to go with the white oak tree. It's really common. You see them everywhere. But I think the reason I'm always really drawn to that is because everything a tree is supposed to do or can do, I think the white oak does really well. They have a beautiful, stately growth pattern. They grow pretty quickly. The bark is pretty. I love the the lobe shape of their leaves, the rounded lobes they have, good fall color, and they're great for wildlife too. You've seen the squirrels and the birds all over them. So there are a few trees out there that are almost perfect trees, and I think that's one of them. Finally, we did save the best for last because we really couldn't do any of the work we do at PHS or community forestry in general without our community partners. We're really excited to be joined by Ruth Burchett, who's the founder of the Heritage Community Development Corporation, and she's someone who has been part of this important work for decades. So, Ruth?
Hey Ruth, I think you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Okay.
Oh, thank goodness. I thought it was
Thank you
just
so
me.
much for pointing that out. I was trying not to make noise while everyone else was talking. So I'll reboot. So Heritage Community Development Corporation began 30 years ago when an elder in our community kind of challenged me to do, I do such good things, why don't I do something here? And since then, we've partnered on building 152 townhouses. We've done cleaning and greening was really the very first thing that we did with our summer youth workers, and with the massive numbers of vacant lots that we've had in our community. So now here in 2020, Heritage has as a main part of its mission to increase the tree canopy, and we were educated by Tree Philly to do that, and we've become a community partner with them on the distribution of trees. And last year, I think we did about 100, and we're very excited about that. Thanks also to Tree Philly, we built capacity within our community-based organization, which has no funding. We're a volunteer organization for all of these 30 years. But thanks to Tree Philly, we were sponsored, a number of us, to take the tree tenders class and the garden tenders class, because we want to also preserve the trees that already exist in our community. And so that's why we do what we do. And my favorite tree is the pine tree, the large pine trees, because they keep giving. When those pine cones drop to the ground, there are people that are collecting them. They use them at Christmas time, use them for making wreaths, and many, many classrooms have projects around pine cones. So it's the gift that keeps giving.
Okay, so thank you to all of our panelists for being here and for your great introductions. So I'll share my favorite tree as well. And you know, this is really hard because there are so many trees that I love. But one of my favorites is the Japanese maple. I think I love this tree aside from the fact that it's beautiful. I love it because it comes in so many different varieties. And I sort of think of it as each tree wants to be its own tree. So that's why I love the Japanese maple. So let's get back to it. We are here today at this Green Philly Symposium to talk about Philadelphia's urban forest and how it relates to climate change and environmental justice. But before we can dig into that, let's start with defining what we mean by urban forests. Panelists, can you share with us all of the key things that we should all know and understand about the urban forest and what we are really talking about here?
I'll start if you guys don't mind. My focus is on the park trees. So trees that people think about when you think about an urban forest. If you're from Philadelphia, the Wissahickon or the Pennypack or Cobb's Creek, any of our watershed parks might spring to mind. And those are areas where you find really dense stands of trees, often within a stone's throw of a really bustling part of the city or a bustling neighborhood. There's about 5,600 acres of natural lands in Philadelphia's park system, which in total is more than 10,000 acres. And one of the things I think it's important to remember about these parks is that they're not really luxuries. It is an amenity, but their actual purpose is to be an ecosystem service. It's a utility. So the big urban forests that we have in Philadelphia were created to protect our drinking water. And they also protect our air quality, which is already compromised and fragile because of the industrial use around Philadelphia. So when you think about our urban forests and our parkland, yes, they're incredibly beautiful. They're emotionally restorative to walk through, but they're actually there to serve a very specific purpose. And one of the reasons that Eric is going to talk about why greening is so important and why attention to the canopy is so important is because where there are urban forests, there are healthier communities, right? So as we talk about justice in the city of Philadelphia, the map of green is actually a pretty good analog to a map of wealth, green in the other sense. So one of the things that I think is really cool about our urban parks is that they're the lungs, they're the kidneys of our city. But more than that, they show how we want to distribute amenities and comfort and health to our citizens. And so when we see those bare spots on the map with our parkland, we have to look and see what other remedies we have in hand to address that need. And so I think Tim probably has a few words to say about some of the other workarounds we have to get those amenities and those health markers into other parts of the community that aren't immediately surrounded by parkland.
Thanks, Mara. I want to talk for a few minutes about street trees, because that is a great way to bring all the benefits that trees offer directly into our neighborhoods, whether they're right next door to parks or blocks or even miles away from the nearest park and open green space. So people might not see a tree like the one that's on the left of the slideshow here, surrounded by asphalt and concrete, and they might not see that as being part of an urban forest, but it's a really key building block of that urban forest because it brings everything that trees offer directly into the neighborhoods, directly not into our homes, but adjacent to our homes, and all those benefits that are so important that Maura already mentioned for improving air quality, providing ecosystem services, managing stormwater and rainwater. Those individual, more isolated trees that are growing out of tree pits in the sidewalk or maybe out of a grass strip in neighborhoods that have those along the curb, they're providing those same benefits. Of course, each individual tree is doing it at a smaller scale, but collectively, all the trees across the city, across any given neighborhood, even along one block, they have a huge collective impact. I think trees and street trees in particular are the closest thing we have to magic in our built environment toolkit in terms of everything that they can do for us. But we are seeing similar dynamics that Maura mentioned with green space, that, if you map our urban canopy, the areas that have fewer street trees tend to be the less wealthy ones. That's not always the case, but that's often the case. And there are a lot of historical reasons for that. But, together we can all work together to bring more tree equity to our neighborhoods. Then the last really great benefit I want to point out about street trees is that, I'll echo Maura, they're not just a nice amenity to have, they're an important and critical building block of a healthy neighborhood. But they're one of the only important parts of our infrastructure that we together as residents can take part in. We're not going to all get together on a beautiful Saturday to build a new sewer system for our neighborhoods, but we can all get together and have a street tree planting. We can plant young trees. We can watch them grow together as neighbors and as residents. We can come together as a community to do that ourselves in a hands-on manner, and we can watch those trees grow and we can take care of them throughout their lifespan as we enjoy all the benefits that they offer. I think that's one of the only ways we can really engage as neighbors in a hands-on way in building our own neighborhoods that way. So we work all across the region to help residents and community organizations do just that. And then Ruth I think she's going to share a little bit about the importance of yard trees now.
Yes, thanks, Tim. So the Tree Philly has the community yard tree giveaway that happens every spring and fall. And it really is a gift to the city, because until this program, there were really just the sidewalk trees primarily, and homeowners would have to buy a tree for their yard. What this tree giveaway program does, it gives the homeowner and individuals an opportunity to impact the tree canopy themselves and to be intentional about it. We have a lot of homeowners that we've discovered have kind of a bias toward trees because of sidewalk trees pulling up the pavements and things. And what Tree Philly has been able to do is really to gather talking points to help educate our homeowners about receiving trees. And in addition to that, actually choose the kinds of trees that have a root system that is small enough that it does not intrude upon the plumbing, which is one of the biggest bias towards trees. But as Tim said, the trees that we give out for the yards are trees that add value to the property. They provide shade for the property as well. And because every season we always wait and wonder what are going to be the special trees that Tree Philly is going to select, it really generates quite a bit of excitement. Whether it's going to be the red bud or the sweet bay magnolia or the Corsica. What's really wonderful is that the span of trees that we distribute are large trees, medium trees, shade trees, flowering trees, fruit trees, figs, pawpaws, nectarines, pears, peaches, and things of that sort. And so there's tremendous value. The other thing is that every time we give a homeowner a tree, that's an opportunity to educate their neighbors about why they got the tree. And during our summer youth employment program this summer, one of our workers developed a survey that we're going to be using this fall. Right now, we're actually using to share with people who want trees.
And I'll just interject to kind of add to what everyone else has said, to kind of round out the view of the urban forest and say that park trees, street trees, and yard trees are a huge part of our urban forest. But our urban forest includes every tree in the city. So that includes trees on commercial land, industrial land, even trees that we might consider weed trees, trees on vacant land in alleyways. We tend to think about land as individual parcels, that exist in a vacuum, but trees remind us that everything is interconnected. And when we plant a tree in our yard, we are giving those benefits to everyone else on the block. So our urban forest consists of every single tree in the whole city. And I wanted to define another concept that we're going to be talking about a lot today, and that's tree canopy. So when we talk about tree canopy, we're talking about the layer of branches and leaves that we would see as we look up while we're walking down the street. And we care about this because that is the source of all of the benefits that we talk about when we talk about tree benefits. The canopy provides shade, catches rainfall to reduce flooding, and catches particulates in the air to reduce pollution. So we're going to be talking about tree canopy a lot in this presentation.
Thank you all. This is great. We're learning so much. So you've been really helping us to understand a lot about the urban forest, and that it's pretty highly complex and pretty challenging to care for. And so Erica started us off with the idea of the tree canopy. So I want to continue on that. And I want the viewers to understand what's been going on over the past few years with regard to the urban forest and the canopy, and to get a sense of what does the future hold for our forest. So, Erica, do you want to keep going?
Sure, I will certainly keep going. So I just want to talk about this study that we commissioned last year. We commissioned this study with the U.S. Forest Service to map our urban tree canopy and where we've lost and gained canopy over the past 10 years. So you can see from this image, we have a 20% tree canopy across the city, but you can also see from this map that it's not equitably distributed across the city. It's concentrated in certain areas, especially around some of our watershed parks and in other areas of the city. And so, the partners that you can see on this panel and many other partners have been working over the last 10 years towards a goal of increasing the tree canopy to 30% canopy. I just want to, we can talk about the partnerships maybe after this question, but 30% tree canopy is the goal that we've been working towards. It comes from the city's Greenworks plan, and it speaks to the need for tree canopy to be equitably distributed. The goal is 30% tree canopy in every neighborhood. And despite the major efforts from the Tree Philly program, from PHS tree tenders, the city and other partners like the water department, to be planting trees over the last 10 years, unfortunately, we have actually lost tree canopy. In the past 10 years, we've lost 6% of our existing tree canopy since 2008. And the majority of that tree canopy was lost on residential land. And that really speaks to the power that the residents of Philadelphia have to impact our tree canopy for better or for worse, and how important it is to include the community in the work of growing and caring for our tree canopy and our urban forest. The organizations on this call and many others have been working so hard to plant trees, but as we know, trees grow slowly. And so some of that tree canopy is not showing up yet to the extent that we know it will soon. And it's going to be very important in the future to preserve the existing tree canopy that we have as well. One of the major takeaways from the study was that tree loss is an event. When a large tree falls, it takes a lot of canopy with it, but tree gain is a process. So those small trees that we've been planting will take time to grow up, and stewardship and care from everyone in the city to grow into the mature tree canopy that we need to make this city livable for residents. So that none of that work can happen without the partnership of everyone. And I know that other groups on this call can speak to the partnerships that are required to care for our city's canopy. And then I think we definitely want Ruth to show to talk about some of the examples she's seen of tree canopy growth and loss in our city.
Yeah, I can say, oh, sorry, Ruth, would you like to go first?
Okay. Well, the picture that you see here now really shows the large pine tree, which is possibly maybe 50 to 70 feet tall. If you'll notice, it's right at a very active construction site, and is really in jeopardy of being taken down. Which, you know, if you look at a mature tree like that, I know I've been looking at it for at least 20 years. So it will be a tremendous loss to the community. It's also one of my favorites because it's pine. And then you see pictured on next to that is actually the site of previously of a pool, a neighborhood pool under the Parks and Recreation that was demolished because of its age. But now it sat as a vacant lot for a really long time, but now it's, if you can see, it's a huge tree house there, and then behind the trees are our raised beds for gardening. And I tell you, there's got to be 20 raised beds there. And it's so wonderful to go there on Tuesday afternoons and kind of hang out with your neighbors and share the food that you grow there. I really just give away all of my food. But what it is that it's not just the raised beds where vegetables are grown and flowers are lined the street. It's just very, very beautiful. It's across the street from my alma mater, Strawberry Mansion High School. But there are many trees that are planted there, and even fruit trees and sunflowers. And so it's a wonderful ecosystem right there.
Okay. Did we have anything else?
Well, I did want to add a few words about the partnership that's necessary to keep this work going. And I think Ruth really kicked off how critical the need to have the community engaged in this work is. I think PHS and the Conservancy both partner with the city of Philadelphia and the communities that we serve in different ways. Here at the Conservancy, we're very proud to partner with Erica and to be co-recipients of the TD Bank Award for Tree Philly in order to sort of steward the public engagement as well as the regreening parts of the Tree Philly goals. So not only do we support Erica, but we also help to work with the city's nursery, Max at the Greenlands Nursery, and we work on some of the management. So once you get a tree, how do you keep it alive? What do you do about the many pests that are attacking trees? So we also work with the natural land staff at PPR to combat emerald ash borer, to do what we can, which is not much, against the spotted lanternfly, and to look at other populations that threaten our canopy. Unfortunately, one of the biggest populations threatening our canopy is us, right? So that is one of the reasons why Ruth's work at the Community Development Corporation is so critical, because we really rely on, more than emerald ash borer or woolly adelgid or any other threat to trees in Philadelphia, humans are the biggest threat, and we are a threat when we don't understand and value the canopy. So our position at the Conservancy is to support both groups like Ruth's in the actual execution and engagement of the work, but also the cities, as we try to enable and facilitate our partners at the city to bring this message and this work across, a population that's very widespread and diverse.
Great. And I would add that the benefit that a community-based organization such as ours has in partnering with the Fairmount Park Conservancy and the Philadelphia Parks and Recreation and PHS and Tree Philly and TD Bank is just amazing. I mean, great kudos to them, is that we learn from all of you and take that information out to our community. A prime example is the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society just planted 37 trees on the campus of Tanner Duckery Elementary School. And so we have been a part of tending those trees and replacing the poles and that are there to protect the trees. And also we forged a partnership even with the two recreation centers that are 2 blocks to the north and the south. Amos Playground, children have come up to Duckery School and have visited the Peace Garden that's being put in, and getting our children to understand the value. The Duckery School has also created a science club that's going to be working with the Peace Garden there. And then you have above us Winchester Playground, which is there also. And everybody, we're really focused to train up a generation of kids that care about the trees, that won't swing on young trees, will understand that they need 20 gallons of water on the regular.
Yeah. That's so wonderful, all these wonderful plans. And so is there a timeline in place for ensuring that climate change and environmental justice are part of this equation? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, certainly. So you can see here we have the timeline for the Urban Forest Strategic Plan, which I've referenced a few times during my comments. We are working with a large group of stakeholders, including everyone on this panel and others across the city, state agencies, the U.S. Forest Service, to launch the plan coming up this fall. And it will include a large public engagement campaign, and it will be finalized in about a year. The there are a lot of ways that we are addressing equity in the strategic plan, including we are going to be doing a lot of prioritization work as a group of stakeholders so that we can work together towards tree planting and care in the neighborhoods that need it the most, moving forward, so that we have a cohesive plan for everyone to be working together to address the fact that our canopy is not equitably distributed, and to make sure that we are balancing the way that we provide those services with where they are needed most. So that's one of the ways that we're addressing those things. We also, in terms of climate change, we plan to re-examine our list of recommended street trees to remove and add trees according to what will survive in Philadelphia in a changing climate. And there's a lot of wonderful research that we can use to that are making recommendations for that work. I also want to say that with the Tree Philly program, we are already doing a lot of work towards ensuring environmental justice in our work, working in neighborhoods with the lowest tree canopy, working to remove as many barriers as possible for people in those communities to get a free tree, including now offering delivery and an option of free planting and care for people with limited mobility. So we're really trying to provide that program as much as possible in the communities where the tree canopy is lowest and where they're most vulnerable. And we're also working with our nursery to source and grow trees that are more appropriate for a changing climate as well, for that yard tree program specifically.
I think another thing that's being done in terms of climate resilience is to look at our natural landscapes and understand the role that trees have in defending from radical temperature change, stormwater runoff conditions, and looking at there is some policy work that's been talked about with City Council at various times about creating a more responsive climate change policy that might speak to trees and tree preservation specifically. But that's one of those things, a political process that takes a long time to get the ball rolling. And once again, that really needs the citizen support that Ruth's group brings to the table. So convening groups like the Heritage CDC is really the most important step to really utilize trees as a tool to help combat climate change.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because Christina raised a question about the liability of the sidewalk trees pulling up the curves, and creating a trip hazard for pedestrians that the homeowner would end up being responsible for should the person become injured. But though the city comes to a block and works with the block captain to make the decision to plant those trees, but the ownership of the tree, although it's on your property, remains with the city of Philadelphia, but the liability for it extends to the homeowner. So just in terms of increasing the awareness of elected officials of that, that needs to be looked at. The other thing is with the Department of Licenses and Inspection, they have a rule that your neighbor can report you on 311 as a violation if the canopy of your tree intrudes upon the airspace of their property, meaning if the branches of your tree cross over the fencing line, not even touching the fence, just being above the line, you have to prune your tree back. And I experienced that myself. Mm-hmm. So, that's something that's really.
Yeah. I mean, I think that to me, that's one of the things that's one of those unseen barriers to greening in communities, is the actual lived practical experience of having a tree, right? And that's where city policy and advocacy among citizens is so important. So all of the work that, that PHS does and the City of Philadelphia through Tree Philly does and Heritage CDC does together collectively are necessary to create a systems change and the way we prioritize trees and greening going forward. And every single partner is necessary to come to the table and sort of shift those policy decisions collectively. And it takes a long time, like a tree growing takes a long time.
Yeah, I'll just add that, I think it's great to see, all these organizations whose logos you're seeing here really respond so proactively to the issue of tree equity. Erica talked a lot about how they're working on it in Parks and Recreation, and I'll, echo that because we focus a lot on it at PHS, and that lack of equitable distribution, it follows patterns. Maura mentioned wealth. Race is definitely one of them too. There's a lot of research that shows historically redlined neighborhoods have a significantly lower canopy than neighborhoods that were listed as desirable neighborhoods during the first half of the 20th century, when housing discrimination was essentially legal in cities. And so we're fighting against those patterns, but we can use, all the great data we have and maps, the tree canopy data, publicly available neighborhood data to prioritize our work. PHS, I know we have our own priority map that's listed on our website. We'll work with anyone who wants to plant street trees in their neighborhood, no matter what. But we have this great map, so we know where to focus most of our efforts. We know where we need to go to proactively build more support for trees, and seek out neighborhood groups who can get involved in our tree tenders programs. We know, in years where we have more limited resources, we know where we need to focus them the most, because we have all these great maps and data. And then I also want to echo a little bit what Maura got at, because when it comes to climate change, we have to protect our trees themselves. And we have some great partners on that list. You just saw Penn State, their extension program, their forestry programs, DCNR. They have scientists who are doing great research on protecting the trees and protecting our forests, our urban forests. But we also know that we have to use trees as a tool to protect neighborhoods from the heat that's going to just be building up. That's such an important tool, like the physical shade provided by trees, and then the cooling from the transpiration from the leaves is an incredible tool we have to protect our neighborhoods from heat, which will just be increasing, and absorb stormwater, because we know that storms are going to be more frequent and intense. Even if we get the same rainfall over the year, we're going to get lots more heavy storms, and that stormwater needs to be managed. And the trees are more likely to be damaged, so we need to plant more trees to replace them, and we need to take care of our trees so that they're not compromised when those heavy storms come, which means pruning them and caring for them so that they're strong when those heavy storms come. So that's just a short version. It takes a lot of work to manage the urban forest. It's a little bit different from a regular forest, which to a certain extent can manage itself. So it's great to see all these partners coming together on it.
I think there's an opportunity. There's definitely an opportunity at hand, because neighborhoods like North Philadelphia, with Philadelphia being an industrial town, were actually designed not with a lot of trees, such as the Northeast and West Philadelphia. So in all fairness, it was for the functionality of having workforce close to the workspace. But now is an opportunity. I know that the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, with a professor at University of Pennsylvania, I met with to learn about the study that they did that says that open spaces decrease violence. Well, here in North Philadelphia, and where we are, is the 22nd Police District, one of the city's most violent areas. And so to the extent that we can capitalize on making a more humane environment for people to exist in is very important. And then also increasing the tree canopy also brings immediate relief for those health disparities that people of our low-income, largely African-American community experience with respiratory ailments such as asthma and COPD, which we have a lot of in our community.
So If I may, I'd like to ask each of you to respond to one final question before we turn it over to our audience to ask questions of the panelists. And that would be, if you could give everyone viewing here today some really practical actions to take that we could all take, right, to make sure that our urban forest grows and continues to provide all of the great benefits to all of us who live here in the city. With regards to climate change and environmental justice, what would you tell us to do? In other words, what are some really practical things out there that we can do, each one of us, to help this cause? Starting with Erica.
Great. Thanks for that question, Paige. And I think a lot of people on this who are looking at this are really looking for this question too. I think there are a number of things that you can do as an individual resident, including planting a tree on your property if you do have the space. So the Tree Philly program is open now for registration for people to get a free tree, either through a citywide event or through our partnerships with groups like Ruth's Heritage Community Development Corporation. And you can find a neighborhood event close to you to get a tree and plant on your block. You can also get involved with us, get in contact with us to host a yard tree giveaway in upcoming seasons so that you can amplify your effect and provide trees to your neighbors and friends and the community. So that's one way. I think Tim will have more to say about street trees and how individual residents can get involved in that. But also, we will be launching the Urban Forest Strategic Plan soon. You can sign up to receive email updates about that. There's going to be a lot of ways for people to voice their concerns and their opinions about our urban forest and how they think we can improve our management of it. Through a citywide messaging effort and survey effort, and also specific efforts in communities of priority. So there's going to be a lot of ways to get involved upcoming next spring, but sign up for the email list and I'll put a link in the chat for that. And I'm sure others have many other reasons.
Thank you. Maura? I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I was keeping my kids in the background, guys. Right. I would just echo Erica in getting involved with the Tree Philly program. That's a really hands-on, important way to do it. But also, I kind of want to harken back to Ruth's point, which is that the barriers that often stop people from engaging in things like tree planting on their own property are often kind of invisible. So be aware of what those are. And as I think our community and our city wakes up to those barriers, be a vocal supporter to your city council person, to your elected officials, to support policies that are going to be innately supportive of greening and climate resiliency. And finally, the last thing I would say is be a great advocate for your trees. If you're on social media, love your trees, show your trees, talk about your trees, how great they are, the pine cones you get, the animals that make a living off of them. I think that one of the really few nice things that I've seen on social media over the last few months is people taking a deep dive into the street trees outside their door and getting to know the birds who are nesting there, interesting bugs people see. I think it is the nicest, most positive thing I have seen on the internet all year long. And I really encourage folks to do that.
Thank you. Ruth?
So I would say advocate for your trees and advocate for them by letting your elected officials know if you live in a hot zone, if you live in an area that's hotter in your area than when you travel to another part of the city, then you need to give your council person a ring. And you need to give your senators a ring and let them know that it's harder to breathe in our neighborhood, and our neighborhoods are smellier because we don't have the trees purifying the air. And also, if you have trees that are planted on your block, just know that the first life of a tree is very, very important. It needs a lot of water. Get a bucket of water and go water the trees. and sweep up around the trees, take the weeds away from the trees, and do those things. And also educate the children about not swinging on the limbs of young trees and not just walking by and tearing them up. Why? Because you're going to want to breathe a breath of fresh air soon. And so you're going to need that tree. I would also encourage people to take a page out of T.D. Banks' book and talk with your employers about the wonderful tree advocacy that's happening around the city and how these wonderful organizations are partnering and working together to improve neighborhoods, quality of life by planting trees. See if your employer might want to get in on it, might want to buy 5 trees or 10 trees or 20 trees or 100 trees and partner up with Tree Philly and PHS to get these trees into the neighborhoods that are very, very needy.
Thank you for that. Tim.
Well, there's 2 things I would love everyone who is participating in this session to do. The first is to get involved in tree tenders. I'll add the link to the chat for that program too, but we offer trainings a couple times a year for tree tenders where you can learn all about how to plant and care for trees in your neighborhood. Those are terrific. We're offering them on Zoom this year for obvious reasons, but we also offer them in person around the region regularly. You can also access a map where you can enter in your address and find out if there's a local tree tenders group in your neighborhood and get in contact them if there is. And you don't have to go through the training to take part in one of our planting days, which we do twice a year in the spring and fall. But if there's no tree tenders group in your neighborhood, get together with 3 folks, go through our training, and you can start your own. So again, I'll put that link in the chat, but check out all of the tree tenders materials we have. And the other thing I'd recommend, and I think this is really rewarding, we all have trees in our neighborhood, whether they're parks or street trees or yard trees. But I think it's really rewarding to learn tree identification so that when you're walking down, you know what you're going past. There's lots of apps and websites that you can do that with. One resource I really recommend is Morris Arboretum put out a book called Trees of Philadelphia. I think it's available on Amazon. You can even order it there. And it's really cool. It lists, common trees and how you might identify them. And also shows you where you can find notable examples of those trees in the Philadelphia area in parks and arboretums and botanical gardens. So it's a really fun resource if you can cure that plant blindness that so many of us have and really appreciate the trees that are all around you. I think it does a lot for your psyche and it will make you much more committed to building urban forest around you.
Thank you for that. So now we will turn to our Q&A from the audience. Sarah, are you managing that?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We can.
Right. So thank you, everybody. That was a fascinating conversation. I know I constantly say this when I hear any of you speak, but I wish I lived in the city of Philadelphia, just so I could benefit from all of the amazing things that all of you do. So we have a lot of really great conversations happening in the chat. Please feel free to ask your questions either in the chat directly or in the Q&A session or section. So we have some questions about the tree canopy itself. So you, Erica, had talked about that the loss of a tree is an event. And some people are interested in understanding what impact does a mature tree have on the environment when it's removed?
Well, I think when a large tree is removed or falls, it has the opposite impact from what it had when it was growing, right? So we lose that shade. We lose the ability to intercept rain as it falls. And that's a really crucial thing for us here in the city of Philadelphia because we have a combined sewer, which I think some people have heard of, but maybe others haven't. But when rain falls and we have these big storm events, the rain all mixes with the sewage and goes into our rivers, which is also the source of our drinking water. So anything that we can do to slow the rain as it falls, And mature trees do a lot of work for this. They intercept the rain as it falls, and they soak it up from the ground and then release it more slowly back into the environment. So that's a huge thing that we would lose, when the tree falls. We lose the shade, we lose the stormwater mitigation, and we lose the ability for that tree to intercept pollutants in the air, all the particulates that it catches on its leaves. The aesthetic beauties. I know a lot of people contact me when there's a tree that's threatened by development because it hurts them. It hurts their heart to see it go, and they really, it's a big emotional impact when a large tree is lost. That big pine tree in Ruth's neighborhood, it's not gone, but even the threat of it going is causing stress, right? So the social and emotional impact of trees, I think, is also something that is a real effect when we lose them.
Thank you. I see that we're getting close on time, so I'll switch to a different category question. So in regards to the Urban Forest Strategic Plan, how is the public engagement campaign structured to ensure that community members can learn about the strategic plan and provide input before it's finalized?
This is a very good question. I was just about to type something into the chat to this one, but we're going to have a number of ways that we send out information. We're about to release a press release, so that'll be going out, and hopefully a lot of news outlets will pick that up. We're going to have a website on phila.gov that will host all of the information, and then we will also be very active on social media, and that's for the citywide efforts that we'll be doing. I also mentioned that there is going to be some more deep neighborhood public engagement that we're doing in priority areas, and with that we're going to be working directly with residents to communicate with their friends and neighbors about the plan, about having a two-way conversation where we provide information to people, and then we also receive information from residents about how their community interacts with the urban forest, what their opinions and experiences are. So there's going to be a lot of different levels of interaction with the public, and we are going to be using some of our city communications to get the word out, social media, and then we have a large project team that includes everyone on this call and many others who will also be promoting the public engagement efforts on their own sites as well.
I muted myself. Thank you. Okay, so we do have a little bit more time. So how are groups adapting to and addressing certain environmental challenges to trees? The examples that they gave were spotted lanternflies or frequent and more intense storms. I'll open it up to whoever would like to answer that.
Did you mean dealing with getting rid of them? Because I've been putting on Facebook to get out your shop vacs and your vacuum cleaners and your Raid or bug spray and spray it into them and then go after them, particularly when they're like at the black and white phase, when they're little, before they get their wings to fly away, and get at them. And it's kind of taken off a little bit. Someone had to really cut down branches of their willow tree, their beautiful, beautiful willow tree. And, so that's what I've been doing.
Well, good old credit card scrapers, time of year now for that, as they lay their eggs on the bark of the tree. Get out your card for a piece of plastic, and now you can scrape them off. It looks a little bit like somebody put dried mud. There are so many ways to kill lanternflies, and I think that we've really discovered a lot of them this year. But some of the other pests and problems that are going to be presented to our canopy are less immediate, have less immediate answers, and need more long-term investment. So Tim can probably talk a little bit about caring for street trees, which is its own animal. Tim, you want to talk a little bit about how that needs to be done? Oh, sorry.
Oh, sure, sure. I've been requested to help open Play-Doh.
Oh,
So I think, yeah, street trees do need a lot of care. They're facing a lot of stress in urban environments to begin with before we even get, these invasive pests that are coming in from around the world and the effects of climate change. So paying extra attention to them is going to be the most important thing. I would say, a lot of that really important work happens when they're the youngest, when they're newly planted, when they're getting established, because you want them to have a really strong root structure. You want them to be able to put a lot of their energy into building that strong root structure. And you want them to, in the forest, it doesn't really matter what shape a tree takes. It'll kind of self prune and kind of grow with the available light. But in a street environment, you need to have it have a certain shape so it's not blocking the sidewalk, blocking cars. You want it to have a good, strong structure so that when those storms hit, it's not going to have branches that are more vulnerable. And so that early attention to the tree, that early stewardship, I do often say like leave pruning to professionals for the most part, but if you have a street tree in front of your house with a broken branch, you can learn like really basic pruning on how to protect that tree through our tree tenders class, or there's a lot of great online resources. But making sure that tree gets a great start early on is the most important thing. And then the other thing we hit folks with before the tree comes in is make sure you're planting the right tree in the right place. If you're in the city of Philadelphia doing street trees, the city or PHS, depending on the situation, will really be choosing that species. But if you're doing it in your own backyard, or if you're outside of the city planting a tree, make sure you're planting a tree that can grow well in the conditions and the space available that you have, and that can really thrive and be resilient. And that's going to be your best bet for making sure that tree will provide those benefits for years ahead.
So I think that sadly our time has come to an end, but I do want to thank our panelists very much for your time today, and for our audience for their active participation in the chat, asking great questions. And I think our panelists have been very active responding in the chat as well. And so I'm sure we can take those questions away and try to get them responded to online as well. So thank you again. It's been a great pleasure and an honor to be with you today. And let's go plant some trees.
thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.